Hey everybody, DJ Brandon here with Pioneer DJ, and I'm excited. The new DJM-S7. This is a 2-channel battle mixer with 8 performance pads on each side, your effects levers right here, and on top of all of the form and function you see, the ability to bring in Bluetooth audio from your smartphone to add a beat that you can then manipulate within the mixer. We have a great deep dive that goes into all the features and functions from one of our demo DJs, Joni. If you need more information after the show, you can always hit us up on our website at pioneerdj.com and follow us on social media. A lot of news, product release, info, new updates. They're all the same address, at Pioneer DJ USA. So stay tuned, enjoy the rest of the show.
Hello everyone, my name is Joni from Pioneer DJ USA. Today I'm going to be showing you our brand new, just released 2-channel battle mixer, the DJM-S7. It's the little brother to our flagship DJM-S11 battle mixer, and it shares many of the same features. It's also improved upon the design lineage that started with the DJM-S9 battle mixer that we released 5 years ago. While at first glance, you might think this is a DJM-S11 without a touchscreen, but you'll actually find that there are several features on here that are exclusive to the DJM-S7. And a few of these features are introduced for the first time on a digital battle mixer. At its introduction, it's actually the most affordable Serato battle mixer that's capable of running 2 laptops. And just like the DJM-S11, the DJM-S7 is plug and play with both Serato DJ Pro and Rekordbox, and you don't need a subscription or a license to use the software with the hardware. The overall dimensions of the S7 is pretty much identical to the S9. If you have an S9 case, the S7 will drop right in. But here's where everything else is different. We're going to start from the front of the mixer, and then onto the top, we're going to go bottom up, and then we're going to work our way all the way to the rear panel. So unlike the S11 and S9, the S7 does not have a mic echo or 2 EQ knobs for the microphone. Instead, it has 1 volume control for the mic and a tone control for the EQ. Below the mic level knob, there is a Bluetooth volume knob. Yes, the DJM-S7 now has a Bluetooth input, so you can pair it with any mobile device. Many scratch DJs like to use their smartphone or their tablet to play beats that they can scratch to while they practice. The way it was done was you take an auxiliary cable that plugs into the input of the mixer and you plug it on the output jack of the headphone output of your smartphone. Unfortunately, as we all know, smartphones are moving away from having a headphone jack. And with modern smartphones, you're going to need a special dongle to be able to connect the auxiliary cable and to be able to charge your device at the same time. But with Bluetooth, you can now connect to the mixer wirelessly and still be able to charge your device. You can play audio from any audio application, whether that's Spotify, SoundCloud, even YouTube, or any backtrack application to play beats while you scratch. So now I'm going to pair my phone to the mixer. It's connected. And I'm going to open up a Backbeat app, and we're going to play a beat. And now the audio of that beat is coming from my phone, wirelessly. Change the beat up. Bluetooth is also great as an emergency audio source for folks who don't have two computers, and just in case your computer crashes, you have an immediate way to play music. And for the mobile DJs who dare, it's also a way for the bride and groom to be able to play their song request directly from their phone, if you want to do that. Everything else is the same here. The curve adjustment for the channels and the crossfader, including the reverse switch for the channel faders and the crossfader, along with the feeling adjust to adjust the tension of the crossfader. Now let's talk about the crossfader. The crossfader here is the Magvel Pro, the same one found on the S11. It's the improved one that is more rigid with 30% less vertical wobble. It's made to last longer and take the abuses of daily scratching. When you actually touch it, it doesn't flex very much. So now let's talk about the performance pad section. The pads are enlarged compared to the ones on the S9, and it does have independent pad mode. The pad modes are all identical to the ones on the DJM-S11, including your favorite ones like Gate Q, Transport, Scratch Bank, and including Beat Jump. You have up to 4 modes per button. Double click to get to Hot Cue, hold Shift to get to Pitch Play, and if you hold Shift and double click, you get to User Mode. Each one of these buttons have up to 4 modes. And just like the S11, you have your combo pad modes, which allow you to combine 2 pad modes at a time and get the first 4 pads of each pad mode. So if I wanted Hot Cue and Sampler, I hold Hot Cue, click Sampler, and now my first 4 Sampler pads are on the bottom while my first 4 Hot Cues are there. And if you do a combo pad on both sides, you have access to up to 4 pad modes simultaneously. And of course, Gate Q is the way to initiate a silent cue. So let's go into Gate Q, engage the silence. We'll load a track, play it, and now you hear nothing. You hit a Hot Cue, hold it, and then click the Hot Cue mode button, and now you play the track from a silent cue. Gate Q allows you to do on DVS with the Hot Cues what was only possible before in internal mode on your DJ software. So say I have my scratch sample here, I can now do momentary triggering of my scratch samples in the scratch track. Now a cool thing you can do with Gate Q is Gate Q scratching. Check this out. So some of our other pad functions is the beat jump. You can control the duration with these pads. So if I want to do a 8-beat jump, move that back. And you can either use it creatively, performatively, or you can use it to jump ahead or jump backwards when you're in transition and you don't quite have the perfect phrasing for a mix. The third function on the sampler button, when you double click sampler, is the transport mode. So let's say we switch to internal, and say we're in a scenario where your needle breaks and you don't have an extra one, or say both needles break and you can't instant double your way out of this and you have to play internally. Well, the transport mode gives you all the functions of being able to play with just the mixer. So now that I'm in internal, I can have my temporary cue. So let's go to the cue button with Hot Cue, go back to transport and set this cue point. And the orange is the cue button, and then the play button, the one blinking, just like a CDJ. Your key lock is the 5th pad, and your beat sync is the 6th pad, and you use Shift to undo the beat sync. And the upper 2 buttons are actually the tempo bending, and the other 2 buttons are the actual tempo change.
Here it is. I know you're feeling this original shit.
So in an emergency, or if you decide you want to just play with just the mixer and the laptop, you can completely spin with just the transport controls. Now, one of my favorite features is the scratch bank. So that's hold shift, secondary, turns pink. So the way scratch bank works is you can load up to 8 tracks at a time, a total of 32 because there's 4 banks. And you can load scratch samples or you can load full songs. So if you want to quickly load a song onto the deck, you can go into scratch bank and then trigger the song, and you can even allocate which hot cue it starts from. The awesome thing about scratch bank is that it allows you to load a scratch sample very quickly, and then you can use shift and any pad to reload the track that you previously had loaded onto that deck. So it's a quick way to get a scratch sample going without digging into your library or going into the search. Really quick, and then you can go back to the song that you had loaded. The other cool thing about scratch bank, especially for hip hop performers, if you have a rapper and you're the DJ and you want to quick mix the performance, you don't even have to put it in a crate. You can put it in your scratch bank. All the songs, one at a time, and they're triggered by every pad. So each one of the pads can represent a new song, and you have up to 32 because there's 4 banks of 8 scratch banks each. For you battle DJs, this is great because you could put your entire routine on the scratch bank. And same with open format DJs who quick mix. You could put your hyper set that you always go to at the peak of the night into your scratch bank and maybe change it around, of course, but it's a quick way to load samples and songs onto the deck. Now let's talk about the effects section. It's a very familiar layout, except you have 6 effects select buttons. By default, the effects select let you select each one of your preset hardware effects, and they are triggered by the paddles along with the level depth knob to control the intensity of the effect. But when you hold down shift, you'll notice the colors change. And what it is that it's actually allowing you to choose your different effect modes. You can go into your internal effects for Serato, and it changes to teal. Or you can go into what's new here, which is the MIDI loop. MIDI loop 1 turns green, and MIDI loop 2 turns yellow. And the last 2 buttons over here let you change from bank A to bank B. We're going to talk about MIDI loop a little later, but let's get back to your beat effects, your hardware effects. To change your effects, you just hold down the effects select button, and you can use the browse knob to scroll. It has the same 22 effects as the S11, including the favorite, ducking echo. You can see the changes to the effects on the display. And you have up to 2 banks of effects which you can customize in the settings utility on your laptop. There might only be 6 effects select buttons, but you have access to the same amount of effects as the S9. And you have the choice of way more effects, the 22 effects, plus the MIDI loop. Now let's go into Loop MIDI, and I'm going to go into Loop MIDI 1. Loop MIDI is a feature that's exclusively introduced on the DJM-S7. What Loop MIDI is are different triggers that send a repeating MIDI signal that's matched to the tempo of the playing track. Loop MIDI 1 allows you to loop your first 3 samples in the sampler bank, or to loop the first, second, third hot cue on a playing track. So let's show you how this works. I'm going to engage the MIDI loop, and if I switch, it switches to the other sample. Let's switch this to 1/1. And you could make it into a beat. And what's cool is you can use it with another song and perform with it. So you got a kick going. So on this side, it does the same thing, except it does it to your hot cues. So And then when you release the paddle, it allows it to play. And then if you choose the other ones, it'll do the second and the third hot cue. And that's how Loop MIDI 1 works. Now let's go into Loop MIDI 2. Now Loop MIDI 2 is a little bit different from Loop MIDI 1. The echo button is gonna allow you to pitch up. The backspin button is gonna pitch down. The flanger is going to do a slip reverse. And when you hold shift and click the paddle, it's going to reset the pitch. And this is really fun to do on a build up, so let me show you how this works. And the reverb button can actually engage a loop. And here's one of my favorites. The vinyl break button actually triggers the first sample on your sampler bank. So let's go over here. Now the phaser button actually cuts out the track. You can do little transformers. And when you use it with a scratch track, it actually mimics having a transformer switch. And what's awesome is all the Loop MIDI functions work for both Serato and Rekordbox. Now here's another cool thing you can do with the Loop MIDI. You can actually reassign the pedals to do something else with the repeating Loop MIDI. So I'm gonna put this on to the lock position, and actually I'm gonna put it back to off, hold shift, go into the lock position, and I'm gonna go into the MIDI in Serato, and I'm going to assign it to the loop roll. And we're gonna turn off auto loop. And now, when I play the song, and I turn on the paddle, we can do a sequence of repeating roll loops, kind of similar to how the slicer works, but you can basically independently set the duration for the loop MIDI against the beat duration of the loop roll. So if I want to go 1/2, but I want to do a, let's do 1/2 to 1. And that's just one thing you can assign to the loop MIDI. You could do this with effects. You could do this with any other parameter in Serato. What's awesome about this is that the DJM-S7 is the first battle mixer with paddle controls for the effects with multiple remappable functions when you're using it in loop MIDI. It's the first battle mixer to have that. Now let's talk about the upper section. The EQ, trim, and color effects knobs are modeled after the S9. That means that the EQs are closer to the center, and the trim and color effects are on the outside to help you know where you are and separate which knob you're touching. The color effects can be changed from filter to anything else you like in the settings utility. You also have noise, dub echo, and wide filter, and you can layer them with your beat effects for multiple effects at once. The browse section is just like on the S11. It has a larger load button and a smaller back button, so it's easier to identify when you're not looking at it or if you're in a dark environment. And by default, the loop section is Serato style. That means you can select your loop length And whatever is highlighted on the software, that's going to be your auto loop. Now, if you're used to the way the S9 was, where there was a preset, predetermined loop length, you can go into your settings utility and also change that so that you have more of an S9 style. A lot of people like to set it at 8 beats and just change it once the loop is initiated. Now, the rear section with the inputs and outputs is identical to the S11. As I mentioned earlier, the S7 is launched at a price that makes it the most affordable Serato mixer that's capable of taking 2 laptops. And along with that, it does have the built-in USB hub that's capable of powering up to 5 volts. You can use it for CDJs in HID mode, or you can use it for accessories like the DJM XP2 so that you have an external controller for additional control. And you can also use it with third-party media controllers as well as the phase device, and it provides enough power to power the phase. The auxiliary input can be boosted in the panel utility by 12 dB. So if you're doing a back-to-back set with a person with an entry-level controller and their output is not very strong, you can actually boost it in the mixer. Or if you're like me, who plays musical instruments while they spin, you can actually boost your musical instrument if it's really, really quiet. So if you're looking for your first battle mixer that has professional features, or a great battle mixer that you can practice with at home, but also professional enough to take to gigs without breaking the bank, the DJM-S7 packs the punch with all the needed modern features, including a few unique ones of its own, and priced at $13.99.